By the late 16th century, the age of the samurai was drawing to a close. As Toyotomi Hideyoshi brought one powerful warlord after another under his control and moved closer to unifying Japan, one clan still refused to submit, the Hojo. To complete the unification of Japan, Hideyoshi would have to defeat the Hojo, who controlled much of the Kanto region. At the heart of their domain stood Odawara Castle, but this was no ordinary castle. It had been built around an entirely different idea of defense. To defeat the Hojo, Hideyoshi marched into the Kanto region with an army said to number as many as 200,000 men. And yet, he chose not to take the castle by direct assault. Why? What made Odawara Castle so different from the other castles of Japan's warring states period? In this episode, we uncover the secrets of Odawara Castle, the seemingly impregnable fortress that stood in the way of Hideyoshi's final drive to unify Japan. By the late 16th century, the Hojo clan had ruled much of the Kanto region for nearly a century, with Odawara Castle as its stronghold. Their domain was rich in land and population, making the Hojo one of the most powerful warlord clans of the Sengoku period. At the time, controlling the Kanto region meant commanding one of Japan's greatest sources of wealth and military power. For 5 generations, the Hojo had defended their domain and built a powerful and stable rule across the Kanto region. At the heart of this rule stood Odawara Castle. But this was more than simply the residence of a powerful lord. It was a vast defensive stronghold built and expanded over generations by the Hojo, and its strength went far beyond its high stone walls and fortified gates. Hidden within Odawara Castle was a defensive strategy that went far beyond the conventions of castles in Japan's warring states period. At first glance, Odawara Castle may seem like any other castle from Japan's warring states period. It has a keep, moats, and stone walls, but its true strength did not lie in the castle itself. The Hojo had transformed the entire castle town into a vast defensive complex. Long earthen walls and deep dry moats surrounded the town, while rivers, valleys, and other natural features were cleverly incorporated into its defenses. This vast defensive line was known as a sogame, or outer defensive enclosure. It stretched for nearly 9 kilometers. For its time, Odawara was one of the largest castle complexes in Japan. This meant that an attacking army had to break through multiple layers of defenses before it could even reach the castle itself. The town itself had become one enormous fortress, but the Hojo had developed even more ingenious defenses. Some of the dry moats featured a special design known as shojibori. Earthen walls were built across the bottom of the moat in a grid-like pattern, dividing the space and making it difficult for attackers to move freely. And as the attackers struggled to advance, they could be targeted from above. The Hojo had devoted themselves not simply to building a castle that could withstand an attack, but to creating a system designed to defend it for as long as possible. And supporting this defensive power was the wealth of the Kanto region. There was food, weapons, and a population large enough to sustain a long siege. Odawara had the resources needed to endure a prolonged war. But the strength of Odawara Castle did not end at the castle itself. The Hojo had built numerous branch castles throughout the Kanto region, linking them together to defend their territory. Together, these castles formed a vast defensive network centered around Odawara. Before an enemy could even reach Odawara, they would have to break through this network of fortifications spread across the Kanto region. In other words, Odawara was not simply an isolated fortress. It was the center of a vast defensive system, supported by the castle town, its network of branch castles, and the wealth of the surrounding domain. The landscape around Odawara provided yet another layer of protection. To the west stood the mountains of Hakone. To the east lay Sagami Bay. mountains, rivers, and the sea all helped restrict the routes an invading army could take, becoming natural barriers around the fortress. Together, these defenses transformed Odawara Castle into one of the most extraordinary fortress cities in Japan, and its formidable defenses would soon become a serious challenge for Toyotomi Hideyoshi himself. In 1590, Toyotomi Hideyoshi completely surrounded Odawara Castle. Everyone expected a fierce siege, but Hideyoshi did not choose to launch a direct assault. Instead, he surrounded the castle, cut off its supplies, and slowly wore down its defenders. It was a siege. The reason was simple. A direct assault on Odawara Castle would have come at an enormous cost in lives. The vast outer defenses surrounding the entire town, multiple layers of fortifications, abundant supplies of food and weapons, and natural defenses formed by mountains, rivers, and the sea. Odawara Castle had been designed to wear down an attacking army before the battle had even truly begun. The Siege of Odawara also brought together many of the warlords who would later become major figures in Japanese history, including Tokugawa Ieyasu and Date Masamune. They too witnessed this enormous fortress city with their own eyes. In fact, Date Masamune, who took part in the campaign, later described Odawara Castle as a place where nothing was lacking, from its defenses to its supplies of food and weapons. The castle was so well prepared that even its enemies recognized the strength of its defenses. As the siege continued, Hideyoshi made another move. He built a new castle on a hill overlooking Odawara Castle. This was the castle now known as Ishigakiyama Ichiya Castle. It was the first fully stone-built castle in the Kanto region. Its stone walls were constructed using a traditional technique known as nozura zukuri, or rough stone masonry, by the Ano Shu, a group of skilled stonemasons from Omi, in present-day Shiga Prefecture. Even after more than 4 centuries, the site still preserves much of the character of the castle as it was built in the late 16th century. It is famous as the one-night castle, but in reality, it was not built in a single night. The castle was constructed over a period of time, and once it was complete, the surrounding trees were suddenly cut down. A castle that had been hidden behind the trees suddenly appeared on the mountainside. It could be clearly seen from Odawara Castle. For the Hojo defenders, the site must have been a powerful psychological blow. A massive army had already surrounded them. And now, Hideyoshi, the commander of that army, had built another castle right before their eyes. From this new castle, Hideyoshi could also look down upon Odawara Castle. He was not relying on military strength alone. By making his enemies feel that there was nowhere left to escape, he was slowly weakening their will to fight. Before long, the battlefield surrounding Odawara Castle was becoming less a place for battle and more a place where the defenders waited for the inevitable surrender. And the fate of the Hojo, who had ruled the Kanto region for nearly a century, was beginning to be decided. After months of siege, Toyotomi's forces had completely surrounded Odawara Castle and continued to cut off supplies to the Hojo defenders. The defenders could still choose to remain behind the castle walls, but the situation was gradually becoming more difficult for the Hojo. The branch castles scattered throughout their territory were falling one after another to Hideyoshi's forces. Odawara Castle was now the last major stronghold still under Hojo control. Even then, Hideyoshi did not choose to take the castle by force. The long siege, the overwhelming military power surrounding the castle, and the psychological pressure from Ishigakiyama. Together, these forces gradually brought the conflict toward its end. In 1590, the Hojo finally surrendered and Odawara Castle opened its gates. After nearly a century of rule over the Kanto region, the Hojo clan had fallen. With this victory, Hideyoshi gained control over most of Japan, bringing his campaign to unify the country almost to completion. The age of the warring states was drawing to a close, and Odawara Castle, too, was about to leave the long age of war behind. Today, Odawara Castle is known as a beautiful, historic landmark visited by many people. But about 430 years ago, this was the site of a massive fortress that forced even Toyotomi Hideyoshi, on the verge of unifying Japan, to choose his strategy with great caution. The true value of Odawara Castle was not its beautiful keep. It was the idea of turning an entire town into a fortress, a defensive system connected to branch castles throughout the Kanto region, a wealthy domain supported by natural barriers of mountains and sea, and above all, the strategy of the Hojo that brought all of these elements together. In the end, Odawara Castle opened its gates to Toyotomi Hideyoshi, but the defensive ideas behind it did not simply disappear. The warlords who took part in the Siege of Odawara returned to their own domains and continued to develop their castles and castle towns. Some are said to have drawn inspiration from the formidable defenses of Odawara. The Hojo may have lost the war, but the knowledge and ideas they had developed continued to influence the generations that followed. Odawara Castle fell, but its ideas survived, and even today, it quietly remains here, carrying the memory of an age when Japan was still at war.